You ever have one of those moments where you realize, in the worst possible way, exactly how alone you are? Not the poetic kind of alone. I mean the bleeding out on the floor, cold metal in your hands kind. That was me, flat on my back in my little welding shop in Yakima, Washington, staring up at the dusty rafters while the smell of scorched denim filled the air. I am 46. My name's Rick, and I run a one-man metal fabrication business out of a garage I converted myself, back when I still thought my family gave a damn about me. I just started a custom job. Client wanted a plasma-cut steel sculpture of a mountain range, something epic for their lodge up in Leavenworth. Thought I'd knock out a few test passes before lunch. But I got sloppy. Boy snug. Glove caught. Flash of heat, then pain so sharp it didn't feel like pain at first. Just a bright, electric scream up my side. Looked down and saw blood soaking through my flannel, already pooling. Here's the twist. I didn't panic. Not at first. I remember thinking, calmly, that I should call my folks. Not 911. Not my ex. My parents. I know how that sounds. But I still had this flicker of hope. Maybe they'd come through this time. Maybe. So I called. Told them I was hurt, real bad, needed help. My mom's voice was loud, music and voices in the background. Laughter. She said they were at a bar downtown celebrating Ryan's new contract. Ryan's my younger brother. Pitched his way into the Mariners Development League. Always the star. Always the one with the future. My dad came on the line too, slurred and cheerful, said something about how proud they were of him. Then they both went quiet when I said I was bleeding. Real quiet. Said they'd see what they could do. That was it. I hung up. That was the exact moment. Right there, lying in a puddle of my own blood, when I realized I wasn't part of the family. Not really. I was a utility. A backup plan. A phone call they answered out of guilt, not love. But here's where the story turns again. I had a dog. Still do, Charlie. Border Collie mutt, rescue from Tri-Cities. Never been trained for anything beyond fetch and leave the cat alone, but that day he barked like the house was on fire. Non-stop. I blacked out at some point, I think, but next thing I know, I'm waking up to my neighbor's face hovering over me. Brenda, the woman who lived in the split level 2 doors down, said Charlie wouldn't stop howling, scratching at the fence, trying to get out. She found me, called 911, rode in the ambulance with me, even though she barely knew me. My parents never showed. Not at the hospital. Not the next day. But my phone lit up later that week. Another voicemail from my mom, asking if I could Venmo them just a little something to help Ryan get settled in his apartment in Seattle. That was the moment I stopped calling them family. Recovery was slow. The kind of slow that makes you question every choice that led you there. 3 weeks in a hospital bed, stitched up and full of painkillers, with nurses who were kind but overworked, and a TV that only got 3 channels. My shop was shut down. My body was stiff and weaker than I ever thought it could get. Brenda visited every day, every single day. Brought soup once. Sat by my bed, even when I was too tired to talk. She even asked about Charlie, made sure he was walked, fed, and comforted while I was out cold. And my parents? Nothing. Just that one voicemail asking for money. No flowers. No check-in. Not even a forwarded get-well-soon card from some distant cousin. If it hadn't been for Brenda, I don't know if I'd have made it out of there sane. The thing is, I kept trying to justify it. That's the sick part. I kept thinking maybe they were just bad at handling emergencies. Maybe they didn't realize how serious it was. Maybe, but deep down I knew. They knew. They just didn't care enough. About a week after I got home, I got the second message. My brother himself, Ryan, he wanted to catch up, he said. Said he heard I took a spill and hoped I was back on my feet. Then, right after those niceties, he asked if I could float him a few grand. Short term, he called it. Some nonsense about needing to secure a condo near the training facility. I didn't even reply. Just blocked the number. He followed up on Instagram, posting some photo of him holding a champagne bottle. Caption, grind never stops. That same day, my power got shut off, billing delay from the hospital stay, and lost time at work. I stared at that dark house and thought, this is what rock bottom looks like. Not dramatic. Not loud. Just quiet. Just cold. Just alone. That's when Brenda knocked. She had a flashlight, a generator, and a crock pot of chili. Told me she figured I might be having a rough night. Said she'd made extra. It was no big deal. I sat at the kitchen table while she lit a couple candles and set up the generator. Humming to herself like this was just some regular Tuesday night. It was the first warm thing I'd had in days. You know what got me? It wasn't the chili, though it was good. It was the way she didn't ask me what happened. She didn't press. She just sat there with me while I figured out how to breathe again. And that's when I realized I hadn't just almost died from a plasma cutter. I'd been dying slowly for years, chasing the approval of people who never saw me. A few days after that generator-lit dinner, my phone rang again. Same area code, same tone of entitlement. This time it was my mother. Said she'd been thinking about me and hoped I was feeling a little better. Then she mentioned that Ryan's signing bonus got delayed, and they were in a bit of a pinch. The phrase she used, just until things level out, still echoes in my head like a punchline to a joke I didn't laugh at. She didn't ask how my recovery was going. Didn't ask if I could use anything. Just ease into the real reason she called, like sliding in a lukewarm bathwater. I stood there, phone in hand, staring at the power meter outside, still blinking from last week's shutoff. My ribs were still wrapped. My left hand was still half numb. But sure, let's bail out the family golden boy again. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just said I wasn't in a position to help and hung up. That was it. No drama. No teatriques. Just a quiet little click that felt like cutting the last fraying wire between us. The next day, they left a voicemail. Said they were concerned about my attitude, that I seemed distant, that family needs to stick together in tough times. And for a second, a dumb, reflexive second, I almost called back. Almost apologized for being cold. Almost offered something, anything, just to keep the illusion of connection alive. But then I saw Charlie stretched out by the shop door, ears twitching like he was ready to go check on the world again. And I remembered who actually showed up when I was bleeding out. Not them. A few hours later, I sat down and wrote out a goodbye letter. Not a dramatic manifesto. Just a few sentences. I told them I wasn't angry anymore, but I wasn't interested in pretending either. That Ryan could have the contract, the bonus, the attention, and the inheritance. I didn't want it. I didn't need it. What I needed was peace and distance. I mailed it, then blocked their numbers. All of them. Brenda brought me a cupcake the next day. Said it was her birthday. We ate it on the back porch in silence, listening to the wind move through the dry grass and the faint barking of dogs somewhere up the hill. That silence felt better than any conversation I'd ever had with my family. When I finally reopened the shop, my hand still trembled. Not from pain anymore, just muscle memory from weeks of lying still. Every weld felt like a question. Do I still have it? Can I trust myself again? The first few cuts came out shaky, uneven, but I kept at it. Not because I believe in myself, I didn't, not really, but because there was nothing else to do but keep going. Brenda stopped by with lunch on that first day back. She said Charlie looked depressed without the sparks and noise. That made me laugh. First time I'd really laughed in weeks. She offered to help with paperwork. Said she used to manage books for a mechanic shop before her divorce. I told her I wasn't looking to hire anyone. She just smiled and said she wasn't looking for a job. Left the sandwiches and went back home. That stuck with me. The way she didn't push. The way she just showed up, then left the door open. Around that same time, I started getting letters from my family. Handwritten ones. Guess getting blocked made them nostalgic. First came one from my mom. Said she missed me. Said Ryan didn't mean to ask for money. It was just a moment of pressure. Then came one from my dad. Short. Cold. Said they still hoped I'd be reasonable and come home for Thanksgiving. That one went straight into the drawer. Then, oddly, one from Ryan. Scrawled on hotel stationery. Said he hoped I was okay. Said our parents were being weird and overdramatic. But then at the bottom, almost as an afterthought, he asked again for a loan. Just a few thousand. For gear. For training. For the dream. That one went in the trash. And just like that, I knew this wasn't a rift. This was freedom. They hadn't changed. They didn't even know how. But I had. One night, I drove out to Rimrock Lake with Charlie, just to clear my head. Sat on the tailgate of my truck, watching him chase moths and shadows. The stars looked like cold pinpricks punched into the sky. I sat there and thought about how strange it was, the things we inherit. Not just money or land, but silence, obligation, patterns, and sometimes pain. I wasn't going to pass those things on. Not anymore. A month after the lake trip, I enrolled in vocational school. Yeah, at 46. There's something humbling about walking into a classroom full of 19-year-olds in snapbacks and hoodies where you've got a brace on one wrist and a face that says you've seen some stuff. But I didn't care. I didn't go there to prove anything to anyone. I went because I needed to build something that didn't come from my past. Something that wasn't just duct taped together from guilt and obligation. Welding classes, CNC programming, electrical systems. The real deal. And not just the hands-on stuff. I found myself looking forward to the theory lectures, which was a surprise even to me. Guess once you've nearly bled out on a concrete floor, your definition of what matters changes. The first few weeks were rough. My body wasn't what it used to be. I had to ice my hands at night. My left shoulder still clicked when I reached too far. But it was my ache now. Earned. Honest. Brenda came with me to the orientation session. She waited in the truck while I signed the paperwork. Said she didn't want to crowd me. But when I came back out, there was a coffee waiting in the cup holder with a sticky note that said, "Proud of you." She never said it to my face. She didn't have to. At school, I kept to myself mostly. The other students were polite enough, though one kid did ask if I was a teacher. I just said, "Not yet," and kept walking. My instructor, Miguel, pulled me aside after the second week. So I picked things up quick. Asked where I'd worked before. I told him my shop, my mistakes, my scars. He nodded and said that counted more than half the guys with resumes. You know, it's funny. While my brother was signing baseballs, I was learning to wire a three-phase motor and debug a circuit board. While my parents were planning their retirement trip to Arizona, I was wrapping my bleeding hand and welding again. They call that failure. I call it foundation. And every time I left class, oil under my nails, so in all the best ways, I drive home to Brenda's porch light glowing like a beacon. It wasn't romantic, not in the way people think about romance. There were no flowers, no grand gesture, no down-on-one-knee moment under twinkling lights. It happened in my kitchen, late on a Tuesday, while the rain hit the windows in that gentle, sleepy way that makes you feel like the world's finally calmed down. Brenda had come over with a pan of cornbread and that look in her eyes, the one she always got when she noticed I hadn't been sleeping again. She just set the pan on the stove, poured us both coffee, and said we should probably talk about what this was. I froze, not because I didn't know, but because part of me still didn't believe I was allowed to have something good. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for her to realize I wasn't worth the mess. But she never did. I told her I wasn't sure I had much to offer. Just a half-broken man with burn scars and trust issues, trying to build a new life out of leftover parts. She looked me dead in the eyes and said she wasn't looking for perfect. She was looking for real. And there it was. I asked if she wanted to make it official. She didn't blink. Just said yes like it was the most natural thing in the world. And maybe it was. We didn't even tell anyone right away. No announcements. No social media posts. It was ours. Quiet and honest. We filled out the papers ourselves. No rings. Not yet. No wedding date. Just two people deciding, on a rainy Tuesday night in Yakima, that being alone together was better than being alone apart. Charlie laid by our feet, snoring like a freight train. And I looked over at her hands, calloused, warm, steady, and thought, maybe this is what family looks like. Not the bloodline you fight to keep, but the hands that stay when you have nothing left to prove. 6 months after we signed the papers, I got a voicemail from my mother. I hadn't heard her voice in all that time, not since the last pitiful attempt to guilt me into bankrolling Ryan's dreams. And yet there she was, static in the background, her voice thinner than I remembered. She said she'd heard through the grapevine that I might have gotten married or something, that they were happy for me, if it was true. Then she asked, carefully, like tiptoeing across a minefield, if I'd be willing to come visit. Just for a weekend. Your dad misses you, she added, like an afterthought. And Ryan's been asking about you. I sat in the truck for a long time after listening. Charlie was in the passenger seat, panting like he knew something was different. I replayed the message once, then again, just to see if I'd misheard something. I hadn't. And the strangest thing happened. I didn't feel anything. Not rage. Not sadness. Not even that old reflexive ache that used to tighten my chest every time they dangled the idea of reconnecting. It was like someone had thrown a rock into a pond that had already frozen over. Nothing moved. I didn't call back. Didn't delete it either. Just left it there, sitting in my inbox like an unopened bill from a utility company I no longer used. That night, I told Brenda about it. She didn't say anything at first, just handed me a warm beer and took the seat next to me on the porch swing. Then she said, almost too softly to hear, sometimes people only want you back when they realize they've lost control. She was right. And maybe that's what the silence in my chest really was, peace disguised as distance. They hadn't changed, but I had. I'd built a life that didn't need their approval. And I finally understood that not every apology needs an audience. Some wounds heal better when you stop showing them to the people who caused them. Charlie started limping that fall. At first, I thought it was nothing, just a sore paw from chasing squirrels or stepping wrong on some gravel behind the shop. But it didn't go away. Got worse, actually. The vet in town, a guy with more photos of dogs on his wall than degrees, took one look inside before even starting the exam. Said it was his hips. Said it happens with older dogs, especially the active ones. Gave me a prescription, told me to think about ramps and supplements. And just like that, my quiet shadow, my loyal alarm bell, my living smoke detector started to slow down. It gutted me in a way I didn't expect, because when I looked at him, I didn't just see my dog. I saw the whole road that brought me here. I saw the day he barked like hell and saved my life. I saw the nights he curled against me when I was too broken to sleep. And now here he was, hurting in silence. No que blunt, just slower to get up, quieter at the door. Brenda noticed it too. She started helping him into the truck bed, gently lifting his back legs with that soft strength she had. She bought a rug for the kitchen floor so he wouldn't slip. She didn't say it, but I could see it in her face. She knew what this meant. We both did. One evening, while she rubbed his shoulder and I was fixing the porch light, I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit out loud. I had missed the warning signs. Just like I missed them with my parents. With Ryan. With everyone else who quietly let me carry their weight until it crushed me. Charlie never asked for anything. He just showed up. And now that he needed help, I finally understood what that kind of loyalty costs. We sat outside after dinner, the three of us, Brenda, Charlie, and me, watching the streetlights flicker on. Charlie's head in her lap, her hand resting on mine. And I thought, I used to believe family was something you were born into. But now I knew. It's who stays when the house goes dark. That November, Brenda asked if I wanted to do anything for Thanksgiving. I shrugged, said I didn't really celebrate anymore. And that was the truth. Holidays had stopped meaning anything to me the year I found out my family saw me more as a wallet than a son. Since then, the fourth Thursday of November was just another day on the calendar. A day where the world felt loud and full of forced gratitude, while I just kept my head down and worked. But Brenda being Brenda, she didn't push. She just said, all right, and that was that. Except it wasn't. She didn't make a big deal out of it, didn't decorate or plan a feast. But that morning, I woke up to the smell of something warm in the oven. She'd made a small meal, roast chicken instead of turkey, mashed potatoes, some kind of fancy cranberry thing I couldn't pronounce but ate 2 helpings of. She didn't say grace. We didn't clink glasses. She just sat across from me, her hair pulled back, wearing one of my flannel shirts and passed the butter like it was any other day. And maybe that's what made it perfect. We didn't talk about family, or forgiveness, or what we were thankful for. The only thing she said, halfway through dessert, was, next year, you should cook. I nodded, and that was it. A quiet promise passed between 2 people who didn't need to say everything out loud. Later that evening, I got another voicemail. From Ryan this time. He said he'd been cut from a team. Something about an elbow injury, scouts losing interest. He sounded hollow. Said he was crashing at mom and dad's place again. Said things weren't great, but maybe we could catch up soon. Talk like we used to. I played the message twice. Then I deleted it. Not out of spite. Just because some bridges don't need burning. They collapse all on their own. Winter hit Yakima like a switch flipped. Cold, blunt, unapologetic. The kind of cold that makes metal scream when you touch it, and your breath feels like smoke. I insulated the shop best I could, hung thick curtains over the windows, brought in a space heater that sounded like an old engine coughing. I was still taking night classes, still working during the day, still trying to keep the balance between moving forward and not collapsing. Brenda worked weekends at the local bakery by then. Said it gave her something steady to do, something that smelled like comfort. I'd swing by after class sometimes and wait for a shift to end, sipping coffee that always tasted burnt but never failed to warm me. Charlie still limped, but slower now. Each step more deliberate. I carried him upstairs without a second thought. It didn't feel like a burden. It felt like something I owed. One night, while grinding down a new gate order, sparks flew wrong and caught the edge of tarp. Just a flicker at first, but then smoke sudden and thick. I grabbed the extinguisher and put it out fast, but the room still filled with the sour smell of burned plastic and adrenaline. And I froze, not because of the fire, but because for a split second I saw myself, months earlier, bleeding alone on that same floor, calling people who would never come. And then I looked around. There was a photo of Brenda and Charlie taped to the wall, held up with a magnet shaped like a trout. There was a card from my instructor congratulating me for passing electrical certification. A metal flower I'd welded badly in class that Brenda insisted on keeping. There was a coffee mug that read, "Not all scars are visible." A joke gift, but not really. That's when it hit me. The shop wasn't just a workplace anymore. It was a monument to survival, to healing, to choosing the people who show up, not the ones you were told to keep chasing. The fire didn't do much damage, but it reminded me what I almost lost and what I'd finally found. We got married the following spring. No church, no rent a hall, just the backyard, a few lawn chairs, Brenda's cousin playing guitar, and Charlie, limping but present, wearing a ridiculous little bow tie. The sun came out that day like it had been waiting just for us. We didn't invite my parents. Didn't invite Ryan. Not out of spite, but because it would have been like inviting ghosts to a harvest. They belonged to a chapter 1 had closed, not because it wasn't painful, but because it was finished. Miguel from trade school came. So did the lady from the bakery where Brenda worked, and my neighbor from across the alley who once lent me a toolbox when mine got stolen. People I'd barely known a year earlier now laughed on my porch, passing paper plates and hugging Brenda like she'd always been family. And maybe she had. That night, after everyone left, we sat by the fire pit in silence. Charlie curled at our feet, snoring softly. I looked at the string lights Brenda had hung between the trees, still glowing like little promises overhead. And I thought about how different things turned out from what I imagined my life would be. I used to think family was a birthright, something assigned. Belmano. But now I know it's built. With patience, with truth, and with the people who show up when no one else does. I haven't spoken to my parents since. Ryan sent a message last month, said he's thinking of moving back to Yakima, maybe reconnecting. I didn't respond. Not because I hate him, but because I don't owe him anything anymore, not even my silence. What I owe is to the people who pulled me from the wreckage, who helped me stand when I had nothing left. People like Brenda, like Charlie, like the version of me that refused to stay broken. We planted a dogwood tree near the edge of the yard that spring. It blooms white every year now, and every time I see it, I think of that day in the shop. The bleeding, the barking, the silence, and a life that grew out of all of it.